Hello, everyone. This is Wasabi Boat Research, and today I'm talking with Snooplyin. I'm not sure how I found you, or I found you on the BGAN Punks Discord, and I've never really I've been in the DeFi space for about a year, but never really into collecting NFTs or super paying a lot of attention to the space. But this BGAN Punks for some reason just really like grabbed my eye, and it's the first NFT project that was like, I don't know, kind of grabbed me by the balls and was like, you need to look at this and start buying and start acquiring. And I really very quickly realized I have no fucking clue what I'm doing or how to evaluate these projects or how I should even be thinking about them or anything. So when I kind of got BGAN pilled, I went to the Discord and you and a couple other people were there and super helpful. So thought it's would be cool if we could just record kind of this like an orientation to BGANs, and you graciously agreed. So welcome and thanks so much. So how did you first become aware of this project? Are you into NFTs in general, or is this kind of the first one that you were really into also?
So yeah, this was definitely the first NFT project that I really dove into hard. I've been around the crypto space since like 2015 or so, and so like I was there for like CryptoKitties, but yeah, didn't really kind of like think too much about NFTs until probably like fall of 2020, when everything was kind of like really starting to ramp up a bit. But yeah, I really just had a friend who was like, "Hey, this BGAN project probably has some legs," and that was just like sent a message, and then I kind of popped into the Discord, minted a couple of bastards, which were my first mints, and then just kind of stayed in that Discord since then, which is about 6 months ago. So very much kind of like learning about the NFT space from inside the NFT space, which is more of like a general philosophy I have about anything, right? The best way to learn about something is to kind of like go get inside of it and then figure out what kind of what the dynamics are and what kinds of things you should be thinking about to understand the space better or worse.
So your Twitter handle is Snooplyin42, and I noticed I was looking at your old tweets, and it looks like you pretty much exclusively tweet about BGANs with a few exceptions. So are you the alt of some OG crypto Twitter personality? This is your BGAN analysis account?
No, yeah, I guess this would be my my crypto Twitter account, but probably it being specifically BGAN is me not tweeting much about anything else in crypto. So mostly kind of just using crypto Twitter as a stream of knowledge to see what the zeitgeist has in store and try to keep up with what's going on.
Cool. So let's do a little bit of background. So how would you describe the BGAN Punks to someone that has, just kind of a passing interest in crypto?
I guess the first thing is, I think the first thing that it is kind of like an art project first. And that's something that kind of like came out of kind of like seeing it in comparison to a lot of the other PFP projects that launched, during and then since then. Just like major social presences and, marketing, offerings and just like these general like teams of people and money being dumped into like pushing something, compared to like BGAN's being this art project from the artist Burke, right? Who is basically like a tinkerer, musician, is kind of dabbling with stuff in the blockchain space since at least like March of 2020 when he released BGAN's V1. And then I think like February, March of 2021 is when the V2 came out. So that's kind of the first thing is think about it as an art project. But then from there, I would say like a BGAN or a Bastard is basically a punk generated by artificial intelligence, a GAN model that kind of Burke trained up based on the original CryptoPunk accessories and types. So, has all of the standard things that you'd see in the regular punks, like, apes and zombies and aliens and so on. But it's kind of just like a GAN model projecting out these sort of like these hybrids, learning what the accessories are, merging things together, bunch of variation in terms of colors. Backgrounds are also like GAN generated design. So it's just a super like colorful, deep, collection of PFPs. But yeah, it's I think this is kind of one of the harder things about the project is like there isn't really in my view like a super quick and easy way to describe what the project is. And it's kind of like, well, probably just browse it a little bit, and then you'll start to get like an intuition for what stands out about it.
Yeah. So if I were to describe it, and tell me if I'm wrong in any of this, you kind of use as a starting point this CryptoPunks project that launched in 2017, and they're these kind of basic pixel art characters that have different accessories and hairstyles and colors, and some are aliens, some are apes, right? Yeah. And what Burke did is kind of took them and, I don't know, manipulated them somehow, and then you start and fed them into this AI model, this GAN model. And the way that works is there are two AIs, right? One AI is trying to look at the original art and make a copy of it or make something similar to it. And then the second AI is trying to guess if it's correct or incorrect, if it's part of the original set of source material or not, right? Like that's the GAN is like adversarial network. So there are these two AIs that are competing. And so you slowly see this process of the machine learning and getting better and better. And is it correct to say that like these punks are the ones that fooled the AI and made it through and fooled one of the actors to like confusing it for a real punk? Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure on the details of that specific thing and whether or not there's a sort of one of the AIs making the judgment, or whether or not it's more of you have like competing outputs, and then there's a sort of like a choosing a winner out of the two to kind of like direct which direction to kind of like move in. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly like what the selection process is, whether or not Burke played a role in that, or whether or not that's sort of like automated. I'm not sure on.
Yeah. So like the thing that really stands out to me with these is like the vibrant colors and the backgrounds and the almost like acid electrified colors if you look at them in comparison to the original punks. So do you know if the colors were sort of the product of the AI, or where did or is that something that Burke injected, or where did these vivid colors come from?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how those were generated. I think a similar sort of playing with GAN models, but I think there was a sort of like a generating of the backgrounds, and then the punks are sort of like layered on top. But if you like look at the collection, you see a lot of like bleeding into one another. So like one of the bastards might bleed into the background, or the color of the background might bleed into the bastard. So I'm not exactly sure where these kind of like start, when they're separated, how they get merged exactly. But yeah, I do think that sort of like that, those colors popping, and that's a common thing people show up talking about, is just as a PFP, like these pop in a way that others don't, which also kind of like all of the variation and the different color schemes, and then the range of those backgrounds is kind of like what creates this depth and kind of like allows for the project to continue to surprise you, even if you've been studying it for months.
So when I was preparing for this, I kind of sat down and tried to figure out, what is it about this project that really grabbed my attention, and that there were like colors. Okay, a lot of projects have cool colors, and I think like besides that, there are two things that really get me. Is that, so number one, that it's kind of a remix of this OG project, which I think says something, I don't know, says something about the spirit of crypto. So like I was on, this fractional art site, and they had a punk that was minted by Ryder Rips as like a ripoff of one of the Larva Lab punks, just as kind of a commentary about the NFT phenomenon. And like that's kind of like a level one way to play it, right? But like this is like taking it and remixing it and making something that I see as much cooler, right? Like you're adding this other layer of the AI, you're adding these amazing colors, you're adding the selection. So like I'm sure that there was an immense amount of trial and error on Burke's part to like get them done by the AI, but also to end up with something looking cool and cooler than the original, in my humble opinion. But then I also think, I've been reading about AI, and I think it really like has kind of a commentary about AI and the state of AI. The state of AI is that it's increasingly kind of dominating our lives with these like hidden recommendation algorithms and search algorithms, and in some cases like sentencing algorithms. If you're part of the legal system, in AI in some states is kind of like telling you if you should get parole or not. So, but then like when you look under the hood, it's glitchy as fuck, right? Like there are all these models that are producing stuff, and they're making guesses in a way that's like completely outside of human understanding or control. And this really just like brings that to the surface. It's like you feed AI this art project, and it pukes up this thing that's like beautiful and pixelated and glitchy, and some you can't even tell what the hell is going on. So I don't know, like in my mind, when I try to intellectualize it, it's this kind of like really interesting commentary on what AI is in our life today.
Yeah, totally. To hit the first point, Burke has commented on this in the past, but part of the inspiration for this was like he didn't think CryptoPunks were that cool, and he couldn't afford one, so he was like, well, why don't I make one that's cooler that I really want to have? And so that was kind of like the inspiration, was like, all right, how do I kind of like spice these things up a bit? But then to the second point regarding AI, totally with you on that. Like the fact that this is not, I mean, it kind of speaks to the whole PFP space in my view, right? Like you look at something like CryptoPunks, you look at like, Bored Ape Yacht Club or Cool Cats or whatever it is, and then you ask like, what's different about each of these projects? And like, the accessories being different and the character in the middle being different, like, yeah, that's true, but like, is that something that like survives the test of time? Like, I think some of these things will just hit a sort of like a social or cultural significance to where they will survive time. But the question of like historically, why does something that basically just like copy paste the same logic, what's unique about it? Like it doesn't fit the build for a lot of the projects that we see. It's like I can write one script that allows for me to layer all these different accessories onto different faces, and then I can use that same script on any number of images I want, and that's kind of like boring. But to kind of like to train an AI to do something that outputs this sort of like the again, just like the depth and kind of the uniqueness to it, adds this entire sort of like historical element to it. So that's one of the things. I'm pretty sure this is the first like GAN NFT project created, and then with BGAN's V1 being March 2020, like this is way before people were just everybody creating derivatives of punk. So CryptoFunks or whatever it was that was on the Binance chain, which was like a literal just copy of CryptoPunks but on the Binance chain. It's like that's not very creative. It's not very interesting. And like as much as a lot of these other popular projects are they're fun to look at, and they're fun to kind of like explore and gain knowledge of, like to me they don't have a sort of like historical significance in a similar way. And kind of that AI element of it, I think that's going to become more and more true into the future. It's like GPT-3 came out like last summer, and there was a bunch of like rich discussion on Twitter about like what this was. You had this AI basically like generating dialogues that seem super real, or stories of fiction that were totally believable as if written by a human. And then of course you can kind of trick the AI to get kind of like lost on a tangent, but it's just like that's where we're headed, really, right? Where when it comes to sort of like human creativity, like you might be able to write a book, and it might take you 2 years as a writer or something, but like when an AI can operate at thousands of times faster than you, and is has the knowledge of the internet at its fingertips, like how many books can it write in an hour? And then you end up in these really sort of like hard philosophical spaces of like how do we value sort of like intellectual creation or creativity in a space where you have all these machines that can basically generate the Library of Babel for us, but an individual writing a book over 2 years is still going to be impressive to another human, I think. So things are gonna get weird here in the future, and I think this is kind of like one of the early instantiations of like here is sort of like an AI, but also an AI trained by a human with human inputs, which I think kind of gives the AI that sort of like, this is sick. It's a machine kind of doing this, but also like it's tied to a human in a way that allows for us to kind of like connect with it a little bit.
So how did you first find the project, and was it kind of like love at first sight, or was it something that took a while to be filtered and develop an interest in it?
I had a friend mention it to me, and then just kind of jumped in and minted I think 3 or 4 BGANs, and it was love at first sight, honestly. Like I was actually kind of like, these are so cool, like right after minting them. But like my PFP here, 5768, is I think maybe my second mint. And like, like at the time I thought like, this is the sickest thing I've seen. Like, this is so much cooler than any CryptoPunk I've seen. And then, after exploring the library, like seeing that it is kind of like super unique in the sense that like the eyes are kind of obfuscated, the mouth is kind of obfuscated, but there's still like these really distinct lines everywhere. So I guess I was lucky in my early mints kind of like blowing me out of the water. I'm not sure how my response would have been with other mints. But that kind of just like launched me into the set, and I just started like browsing and browsing and browsing. And really haven't stopped since then. So I guess that's about as much as a love at first sight as it gets.
Yeah, I started looking through these, several times and telling myself, all right, I'm just going to start at 1 and kind of like make a list of all the cool ones. And I usually get to like 1,500 before I'm like, fuck, there are too many cool ones. And I just need to like, like it's just, it's a really deep project. So let's like dig into some actual ones and talk about them. So I know like a lot of these, or most of them, or all of them are on OpenSea, like that's, NFT HQ, but there are a lot of these other sites that have come up where you can browse them, just this project. So do you have a favorite place to browse and filter and see these?
I guess there's allbastards.com, which was built by Roscoe, who's a part of the community. And that's, to me, the most like visually appealing place to browse. I guess the one difficulty is there isn't market data, so you can browse, but you're not going to necessarily know what's for sale, what it's listed at, and things like that. So it's kind of like a mixture. If I'm browsing to kind of like to isolate what are in the the NFT 20 pool and the NFTX pool, then I can do that quickly through that site, which is really nice. Or if I want to look at like all the the alien humans or something, and I want to browse them as a set, just to like figure out which ones I like, and it's kind of removed from market aspects, then I'll use allbastards.com. If it's more like shopping, then I do use OpenSea, and Roscoe's tool is really a work in progress. So eventually I expect him to like plug in all this sort of like this market data and stuff, but it's kind of growing. Another community member, BokkyPoobah, built a page as well. The URL is kind of tricky, so maybe I can share that with you for like show notes or something. But he has a bunch of like cool tools that he's built in. He's been like tagging certain things, so in terms of like metadata accumulation and getting that assigned so it's on OpenSea, like a lot of that's still a work in progress going on in the background, but he's been tagging things on his own, so you can kind of like see all the hoodies that he's tagged. He also has this really cool step through tool that he built for the hypes, which I guess that we haven't really mentioned those. Kind of the BGAN collection breaks into columns and then hypes, and columns are more sort of like traditional, it's a still image with the BGAN on it, and then it either has like a solid background or a glitchy background, which you were talking about with some of the colorfulness. And then hypes are these sort of like these GIFs where you watch basically the BGAN kind of like morph into some number of other BGANs over 90 frames or 180 frames or something like that. But BokkyPoobah built this tool that allows you to basically pull up a hype and then kind of like step through it frame by frame, and then you can like export those images. And then a lot of the talk about hypes in kind of the Discord has been they're really cool, people really enjoy them, but you can't use them as your Twitter profile picture, and so there's a sort of like doesn't exactly work in Discord. I think it does work if you have like Nitro or something, you can use a GIF. So I've seen a few people using them there. but being able to kind of like pull a still from that animation is really cool. And so that's another thing I'd say about the community that's been really cool, is just like watching people just kind of like just build stuff on their own and kind of like add to the experience. But yeah, long-winded way of saying allbastards.com, and then the BokkyPoobah channel, and then OpenSea if I'm really like browsing for market purposes.
Yeah, All Bastards was the one that I found and really like, because it gives you like 100 of them on a screen that you can just quickly zip through. So let's talk about some of the categories. So you mentioned the hypes. So those are a GIF. They're GIFs of that kind of take ones that are stills and then transform them, or are they ones that are not part of the still collection? Do you know if they map to stills?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not exactly sure how those were generated or if there is a relationship with stills. In the cases that I've thought like mapped onto stills, I've then gone and found the still that goes to the hype, and there's usually like a subtle difference. So I'm not exactly sure if like I guess hypothetically all the hypes could have been generated, and then you probably could have taken stills from them. But my guess is that they were kind of generated from separate buckets, even though there seems like there is overlap. But yeah, it'd be a better question for Burke.
So I know with punks, like if you're familiar with punks, you have the apes, you have the aliens, you have the zombies, and those are all present in the Bastards, but there are also some kind of unique categories besides the hypes that are unique to the Bastards. So what are like, I don't know, we don't have to go through every one of them, but what are the kind of key categories to think about if you're trying to kind of unpack the collection?
Yeah, there's kind of like two general concepts. The first is kind of like the GAN doesn't know what a zombie is, right? When it's training, it's kind of like just training on all these different characteristics. And then so the end result is basically like a bunch of sort of like hybrids and mashups of different things. And if the common pattern is something like we call large, which would just be a male from CryptoPunks. But like that pattern is common enough, so it gets kind of like output enough by the GAN. So you end up with enough larges and enough like or petites or aka females. Or zombies and apes and aliens, like those are the common kind of like core, because those are what I guess when trained on those kind of characteristics together, they carry through to the final output. But at the same time, there were sort of like mismatches of that. So if you have like a male face with a male nose and then an alien ear, we have an alien human for that category. Or an alien ear on, a petite or a female face also would be an alien human. So, basically all these different hybrids, ape zombies, alien zombies, and then, alien apes is the rarest group. I think there's like 20 of those, which would just be like, an ape nose or an ape face outline with an alien ear, or an alien nose with an ape face outline. I think there's a couple of those. So that's kind of like the first section is all this sort of like mismatching. That also applies to like accessories. So like there are different hats that have been merged together, or different hairstyles that have been merged with hats. A common one that has been popular in the marketplace has been like this tassel hat hoodie combo. For some reason, the GAN generated a decent amount of those, and hoodies run at a premium. So this sort of like, there's probably like 10 to 20 of these like tassel hat hoodie combos that are kind of generated. Do
you have a number of one of those to check out?
You know what? The 9th sale from last night is actually one of those. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Yeah, 722 definitely. And this is kind of a fuzzier one. These egg carton backgrounds have this sort of like this almost like see-through aspect to the punks sometimes. I've noticed it with some of the smoking characteristics, and in this case you can kind of see the background a little bit through this sort of like this hoodie noise on the left side, but then it's got the tassel hat on the top, which is the kind of the common characteristic. There's either like the tassel hat on the top with some hoodie on the right side or some hoodie on the left side. But that same general concept applies to like eyewear as well, and sometimes there's like a hat with a hairstyle coming out of it. So it's kind of like this GAN range of it kind of like merging things together, is yeah, one of the trickier parts in terms of all the accessories and trying to like classify and understand what it is that you have with a specific punk or bastard.
Yeah, I really love these plaid background ones. It almost reminds me of like a, elaborate flannel shirt or something, and then it's like melted into it or melted into it.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful one. So let's talk about this. I mean, like one kind of meta question about NFTs is, I'm not sure if have all of your bastards or you're still collecting or what, but like it's so hard to distinguish one's own preferences to what you see the market, going after, right? So like, do you just collect the ones that you love and speak to you? Or are you looking to kind of play the game of trying to figure out where the market is going and what's overvalued or undervalued? Or how do you approach kind of making that connection between the market and your personal preferences?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's been an interesting aspect of Bastards. When the project kind of first launched, the only metadata properties were hype type, so it was either a calm or a hype, and then there was a bastardness trait, which is kind of like an arbitrary value that Burke had assigned to the whole set that had like varying degrees of rarity. Most, I think, all bastardness is under 1%, and then some is like really rare, like 0.05% or something. But you can't actually see that trait, that metadata trait, through the image at all. And so in the early marketplace, there was this sort of like this split of people basically like chasing. One, hypes were going at a premium for sure, but then people were also paying a premium for bastardness, rare bastardness. So like a 1 of 1 bastardness sold for like 23 ETH or something. I think that's still like the highest sale ever. But you can't see that bastardness anywhere. You'd have to know, oh, that's that one. And then, so the other side of the market was kind of like aesthetics first, right? So I think basically every project that has like a punk element to it, like hoodies go at a premium for whatever reason. Like it just has like a sort of like a cultural sway. People like hoodies. And the same is true with the BGANs. You see those going at a premium. So it's kind of like, in that situation, I didn't, when I first minted, I didn't think anything about hoodies. But then when you see people basically like, cornering that entire hoodie market, and there's only, I think, like 50 or something in the collection, then it's kind of like, all right, well, if I had an opportunity to get a hoodie, I should take it. So there's kind of like a combination. I'm not sure, like, long-term how much, like, metadata and stuff is really going to be valued in the same way that I think it's valued in a lot of these other projects, where really kind of the core of the project is kind of the description of it, right? Like, if you're browsing... if you're browsing punks or whatever, and someone says, well, I have an ape and it has a beanie and a cig or something, like, exactly what that punk looks like. And like if I said that same thing about a BGAN, you have no idea what that BGAN looks like, right? The characteristics will be kind of there in terms of form, but the colors will be different, the background will be different, the skin color of the ape would be different. And so aesthetics, I think, play a larger role in the BGAN collection than a lot of other collections, because there isn't enough variance for that to actually kind of like to jump out. So I'd say it's kind of a balance, because even within that realm of sort of aesthetics first, like if you don't have a good sort of taste for the aesthetics, then it doesn't matter that you really like what you got if you're planning on trying to sell that in the future. Like someone else has to really like that. And yeah, even watching the market over the last few days, like there was a sale today for an eyes with diagonal line. So it's a type of glitch background. And it sold at like 5.5 ETH or something like that, when there was another glitch pattern of the same style for 1 ETH available, right? So it's not just like people coming in and grabbing the lowest item within a sort of like a specific area focus or specific accessory or pattern in this case. Like the person likes the aesthetic, so they spot buy this thing that's 5x the floor price for that property, because they the piece just resonates with them. So yeah, some sort of balance of that, but it the sort of like meme economy is really hard for me to navigate. Like all the altcoins, the dog coins and stuff like that, and early 2021 was like kind of chaotic to me. Is kind of like, all right, you're officially just playing this sort of like which which narrative is going to get the most sort of like collective agreement, collective belief from the internet. It's a very different game than, being like, well, I think, I'm going to invest in Ethereum because, the value propositions are A, B, and C. But I think, aesthetics kind of like fall into a similar sort of realm. NFTs more generally, when it comes to sort of like chasing what's going to be popular within this realm, I think fall into that meme space, which is it's tough.
Are you still collecting, and how do you approach adding to the collection or selling? Like, how do you think about what to buy or dispose of?
Yeah. So yeah, I still add slowly, and I haven't really been selling. And it's really been about, I guess, a big part of my time with the project is browsing the collection in order to classify. So there's a whole background to that, which maybe we'll get into. But like I've looked over the entire 11,305 collection, maybe like 100 times. So like I've basically kind of curated favorites. But having done, as you said, like you look at 1,500, you're like, wait a minute, my list of favorites is too long. Like that's basically kind of this thing that stops me from having to buy at any given moment. Because I know there's 100 other bastards that are going to come up for sale that I'm going to be in absolute love with, and I can't buy them all, right? So it's kind of like this weird space of, when do I really have to buy something? And yeah, my more recent additions have been kind of like, a bastard that I noticed within the first month or something, and then it suddenly came on the market at a price that I thought was too good because, I assume my sort of love with it is it kind of like ripples through the rest of the community, or I guess kind of some reliance on my knowledge of the collection to know that like, wait a minute, this does stand out. I haven't seen any others that have this sort of, color scheme with this specific background, or a floor bastard I bought early on was like, wait a minute, this thing has 3D glasses and a heart glasses lens. So I haven't seen any of those. Like I should go ahead and grab that. So yeah, it's very, very kind of like on the fly, but there is this sort of, I have a defensive mechanism in place because there's just so many that you would like. And again, yeah, can't really buy them all.
Yeah. So you kind of do a ton of research and then have a watch list and know you have the intimate knowledge to the point where you can kind of see, oh, this one is trading at, or this one's a good pickup based on your personal watch list, but it's not necessarily directly tied to like the current market. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it would be totally speculative. I mean, there's a ton of sales that I've seen that I don't get at all. And then there's other sales where it's like, yeah. I had a feeling that this would, get purchased and then be able to resell again. And that's kind of what's tricky about kind of the market more generally is that like when you have these sorts of like these ebbs and flows, like it really does, like if you list a bastard for 3 days or something, 5 days. Like if the right buyer doesn't show up within that period, it doesn't mean the bastard's worth less. It's just a matter of this sort of like, how much patience do you have to allow for the right person to get eyes on, what is an incredibly unique kind of like piece of art. And really when it comes down to it, like this entire collection is made up of these unique pieces. So yeah, it's kind of, I think patience is the name of the game. If you're looking to actually like find a buyer of something that you think, has a sort of like an aesthetic to it that someone would identify with. But yeah, other than like, if you buy a hoodie, like the hoodie's going to sell. Even when it comes to some of the rare types, like those markets, kind of the floors were eaten up on those a few weeks ago, but there has not been a lot of like dipping into more expensive rare types. So, like I guess like ape zombies, for instance, like the floor was eaten up, like anything that was listed under 4 ETH, but no one's willing to pay more than 4 ETH, it seems, for those. At the moment, alien zombies, similar, like floor went up to like 3 ETH, but no one's spending any more than 3 ETH on those. And I don't know if that's, again, just kind of like buyer specific. And then you have people kind of like coming in and sweeping up hoodies for 10 ETH, 15 ETH and stuff like that. So yeah, lots of, even though, again, hoodies are, more common than both of those other types, like there's this sort of like disconnect with the metadata classifications for some of the buyers, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it seems like the hoodies is kind of a straight mapping from the punks, right? Like hoodies are prized within the punks, so naturally they'd be prized here. But do you see, like, for the other traits, do you see that kind of coupling, or is it more idiosyncratic between the two collections at this point?
Yeah, it's a good question because I mean, hoodies have always been, big for the punks, but the hoodies have rallied like significantly in the last week for punks, and then like BGAN's had a hoodie rally like 3 weeks ago, so it's kind of like this weird sort of like BGAN surged on the hoodie level before kind of punks had this more recent surge, and so like which direction things are kind of going is kind of interesting. And I think the other problem with the sort of like there being any parity across the accessories is just like the differences in quantity. So like how rare something is in punks has no relationship to how rare it is in BGANs, and a lot of that metadata is still pending. Like we don't have exact data for how many tassel hats or how many 3D glasses there are yet. Like that stuff is still being kind of compiled. And that might also play a role in the metadata kind of like being on the shelf and this still being like more aesthetics first. But I do think, yeah, long term, like aesthetics will play a huge role. And then, yeah, the relationship, I would expect, like, as punks continue to be kind of the leader of the space and people to learn what they are and then kind of see the role that they play within this sort of like this cultural, signaling game, they are going to look for other projects. And so, like, projects like CryptoFunks and, all these other derivatives, like, it makes sense that people will go to them because they don't have, 100 ETH or whatever to spend on something. And I do expect people to discover BGANs through that mode. But I also think people discover BGANs every day just by seeing people on Twitter with BGAN avatars and being like, wait a minute, what is this? This is something unique. So, yeah, I think there'll be some overlap, but I do think that these are kind of like running separate courses on different tracks just due to the variables being kind of like too different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the one, like, in terms of my own personal preferences, the ones I find myself drawn to are these really glitchy ones. Like, I'm just looking at this one now. Let us see, 3235. This one, you have this, plaid background, and it looks like a female punk, and her face is just like melting into the background, or it's like you're seeing her through like hazy glasses.
Oh yeah.
I might actually put a bit on this puppy right now as we're talking. That is a beautiful one.
Totally.
But yeah, I don't know. In my looking over the last day or so, like I have seen, it does seem to be like the coolness of the background plays a big part, and then also this, you don't want them to be too nice and crisp looking. Like there's this hazy effect is something that's really cool. At least, I don't know. Do you see that as a trend, or is that?
Yeah. So this is actually a previous point I was gonna follow up with when talking about kind of the breakdown of the accessories and the merging of them. The second point that I wanted to follow up was actually specific to 3235 here, where its type is X Bastard, because you're right, it kind of like, it does have that thinner face, so maybe it would have been a sort of petite if we could see like the nose and the ear and we could confirm these other traits. We don't get to see those though because it's too pixelated, and so that's what creates this sort of like this X Bastard type. I think there's like 100 and maybe like 50 of those or something. But this is basically like early stage GAN. So as Burke was kind of training up the GAN model, right, like it got better and better and better at kind of creating these refined bastards. And then so like the earlier stages are these ones we're looking at where it's kind of like, it's kind of chaotic. You can't really tell what's going on. You have a sense for what's there, but it's not super distinct. It's not super clear. So it kind of like falls into this X Bastard category. But the thing that has come up in the chat is basically like, again, this sort of like divergence. So there's people who come in and like early on in the early days, like people were obsessed with the cleanliness of the bastard. So they were focused on the exact opposite of the X Bastard. Somebody even like built a tool where you could pass in, your image, and it would tell you like how much sort of noise was around the outline of the bastard, and this idea of like the perfect clean, was it out there? And this would have been, again, just like a super late stage GAN, BGAN to come out. And then obviously the early stage being the X Bastards, which people were also obsessed with. And so there's kind of like people who were chasing these, which I'm a huge fan of for sure. and then other people that like they want to see the cleanliness, they want the characteristics, they want it to kind of connect with that original set a little bit more, I think. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to I feel like I've hypothesized that like an appreciation for this sort of like the X Bastard is something that kind of develops slowly. So it's like as you explore the set, you gain an appreciation for some of the noisiness and some of the oddities, right? If the first instinct is like to see something that's clean, will look good as your Twitter avatar, then putting some sort of like messy blob as your Twitter profile is almost like a meta play, right? Like who are you signaling to with something like 3235? Like I think you're signaling to BGAN owners, right? Like people who understand the collection and would appreciate that specifically. And so it's kind of this weird sort of like, do you have knowledge enough of the set to understand why that is so sick? Or not, and you kind of like miss out on the game. But these sort of like meta plays, I see as an upside. In my view, X Bastards will be like a premium long term. It's just a matter of like enough people having sort of like knowledge of what an X Bastard is, what makes it kind of cool, and what it represents about the project more kind of higher level.
Yeah, I think if you're a kind of crypto Twitter anon, you want an X Bastard. You want to be the shadowy. Can't really figure out who it is, pixelated, blurry. I like that kind of adherent, or I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, totally.
It lines up correctly. So you're in the Discord, you're talking with collectors and people. Like, what are the kind of market dynamics you see? Like, who's buying these? Is it people buying up the floors? Are you getting any of these like big NFT DAOs or collectors or that sort of thing? What are the kind of categories of buyer that you see and talk to?
Well, yeah, I guess maybe I can give some background here before I give that answer. So yeah, a little bit of background. This project kind of like started red hot, and I think it was February, maybe March of this year. Minted, I think like 6,000 bastards in like 4 days or something like that on a bonding curve. So this project launched when bonding curves were the way that people were launching projects. But this was like right launching into NFT mania. And so there was just like all of these bonding curve projects, cropping up that week, and people were kind of like rushing in and out of all these different projects. And then Bastards hit like a 0.7 bonding curve price, and the market on OpenSea had basically kind of like become too disparate, so it kind of like stalled. And so we had this sort of like this weird few months, almost like the BGAN winter, where nobody was minting because you couldn't mint and it be logical. Like you'd be basically like there weren't buyers on the OpenSea market that would cover the cost of a random mint. And then there weren't enough sort of like categories laid out to understand rarity in any real sense. So basically, to mint at 0.7, you had to hope to get a hype. And then if you got the hype, you were roughly like breaking even, maybe coming out a little bit ahead if you could flip it on the market. So incentives got all jacked up there. And then so we had this weird space of kind of like trying to figure out what to do from this spot. We had a bunch of like loyal collectors. People were still kind of chipping up on the bastards they liked as people were kind of writing off the project and rushing elsewhere and kind of like dumping at a loss. So people were kind of accumulating during that stage. So that was kind of like the early stage collector, I guess. And then we figured out like, okay, well, what we need to do is basically we need to accumulate metadata so there is more understanding of what the set is. People need to be able to discover the bastards they want. So if there is a hoodie, like go find it quickly. And if you want to buy it, like, being able to find it so you can buy it. Those things are kind of like important for the project to mature a bit. So that was kind of an initiative we launched a couple weeks after the mint had stalled. And then we came up with this idea to basically from just like weeks and weeks of debating what to do about the stall, and people were like, let's burn the rest of the bastards. Other people were like, definitely don't burn them. Let's mint them and put them into a DAO, and then we can sell them off and then fund the DAO to do things. And so all these different ideas bouncing around. But yeah, there's kind of like the community kind of like rallied behind this idea of like burning these pieces. There was I think about 2,000 pieces left to mint, was kind of like, it seemed wrong, right? Like if the value proposition was like, look at this art project and how magnificent all these pieces are, like how could we burn these? And that the community really rallied behind that idea. So someone came up with this concept of like setting up a proxy contract that would interact with the original contract and reverse the bonding curve. And then basically what that would take was Burke would fund the proxy contract to mint at the original bonding curve prices, but the proxy contract would have a reverse bonding curve that was halving every 7 days. And then basically that would just happen until everything sold out. And so that's basically what Burke built, launched, and then the community kind of like rallied around that concept. The bonding curve was reversed, I think like 3 or 4 weeks in, everything sold out in this sort of like, just like this fireball of glory, just like, 700 mints in like 30 minutes or something on the final day. People just like rushing into the chat. That final week was really like this intense sort of like new user adoption space. But it kind of threw us all the way back to the early stages of like who is a part of a project after, a sort of like a mint that had a ton of hype. Right? It's just like kind of like anybody and everybody, people looking to flip quickly, people who were now going to be sort of like these diehard collectors were there. But it was kind of this sort of like mismatch. And so it's kind of like we had, most of the sort of like the weak-handed had been kind of like filtered out from the previous winter. And now we had a similar sort of opportunity where there was a bunch of people that were going to be weak-handed and trying to just like flip to rush off to the next thing. And then we had kind of like a surge a couple weeks ago just kind of like hype blowing up, people talking about the project, a bunch of big sales, and that brought in kind of like a new set of collectors. And so like who the collectors are, again, kind of like breaks into these different subgroups. And then now kind of like seeing another sort of like surge of people coming in. There's people asking about rarity. They want metadata. We have people, this glitch pick airdrop that's going to be a sort of like a 1-to-1 airdrop in the future, that people are kind of like they're coming for the airdrop more specifically, it seems like. So it's kind of like, within the community, this range of person that shows up, someone who's like always just typing like when glitch picked, and then someone else who is kind of like, again, deeper. They're kind of like studying the set, talking about kind of like subtleties within a specific subset of the eyes glitch background or whatever. But yeah, it just like as this timeline has kind of like played out, the range of people collecting, who the buyers are, has kind of like swung back and forth from these different places. And so, to get back to kind of like, the core of the original question, there are kind of like whales that come in and, just start accumulating. So I think like even before the reverse bonding curve had kind of like finalized, like I think it's Alien 1337 from the OG Punks, the owner of that alien came and just started like minting bastards. I think he minted like 50 or something at like 0.2 or something. And so, he's just sitting there holding all of those, right? And then, you also have people like Mooncat, who showed up maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, just started accumulating really aesthetically pleasing pieces. So somebody that's just like got a very specific taste that meshes really nicely with the collection, and then you go through their profile and it's just like this person, just like sniped so many good pieces during a sort of like a downtime. And he's just mostly just kind of like sitting there accumulating. And then,
dude, I was gonna ask you about Mooncat. I mean, that was one of the people I reached out to try to get on this podcast, and because I was just looking through punks and would just click on the ones that appealed to me, and it was like Mooncat, and I was like, fuck, who is this guy, and why does he own all the ones that are so beautiful? Mooncat, right. Shout out, you have some great taste. That's I would definitely encourage everyone to check out his collection on OpenSea. I think it's 888 Mooncat on OpenSea.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, I guess that he like that model of collector was kind of like during the winter, those were really the only people showing up, right? It's people who like found the project compelling, would check in the Discord and kind of like see, all right, the community's active, they're doing stuff, they're moving things forward. And I really like the collection, so I'm going to collect right now. Like, I'm not collecting to flip in 2 weeks. I'm not collecting to flip in 3 days. Like, I'm collecting to hold these because they're I believe in the art. And so like there, yeah, a handful of people like Mooncat. And then even during the surge, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, what was interesting was a lot of spot buying, which kind of matches that sort of like aesthetics first thesis, right? It's like instead of buying the floor version of the ape, like the person's buying the ape that's 3x the floor or 5x the floor because that ape is so much cooler than the one that's at the floor. So it's not like specific to the ape property; it's specific to like the quality of the ape within that larger set. During this, the last few days of surge here, I would say that like that has introduced this sort of like there's been more floor sweeping suddenly, and so it's kind of like watching this project evolve has really been kind of informative in the sense of like there are these different types of collectors that exist out there, and different, I guess people are attracted to different things. And so like right now we're in this stage where it seems like BGANs are getting enough kind of like clout on Twitter where people are coming in, they're buying 1 or 2, maybe 3 around floor prices, and then they're hoping that price goes up. I think that's like you need kind of like all these different people kind of collecting all at once for the market to be like truly matured and healthy, and really kind of like see the upside that it can realize. But we've kind of had this sort of like we're getting portions of them at different times across this like this more drawn out timeline.
Cool. All right, so let's play a game. Let me throw you out some numbers, and I'm just going through. I've tagged a few that have kind of caught my eye, sure, or that have interesting stuff about them. I'll just spot you up with a couple and tell me. Let's play a game of like overvalued, undervalued, or if there's any kind of interesting commentary that you have.
Okay.
Let's start with 1683.
All right, 1683. So this is definitely an X Bastard. And then it's got the triangles background, which I think are kind of like the most notable things. Triangles are interesting. They have like a higher percentage in terms of if you look at all the glitch patterns and their distribution, triangles are up there. I think there's like 150 or 60 of those. But to me, they're one of the more interesting backgrounds, just for whatever reason, like all the different colors kind of like broken into those halved squares into those triangles have always been really attractive to me. And as we were kind of like earlier talking about, like I'm a huge fan of the X Bastards. This is a particularly good X Bastard. Like you really can't see anything here. You have no idea what the eyes are. Maybe there's a tiara, some sort of tiara at the head. But it's kind of like there's this weird space where, again, the GAN just like generates shapes in certain spots, and these are really susceptible to reading into them what isn't actually there, just because like you get used to seeing certain patterns, and all of a sudden you're reading all like, well, that's an alien nose, and it's like, well, is it really an alien nose? Like, so yeah, I say this is really a premium X Bastard because it's like it's quite blurry. That does remind me of like you have X Bastard in this case. And some of the trait classification that we're doing is like eye specific, head specific, mouth specific, and some of the other traits that we're going to have to assign to cases like this, where you can't make up what the eyes are, we're going to be doing traits like, X eyes or X head or X mouth, in a way that kind of signals like, no, you can't make up what the eyes are, because the whole point of sort of like this metadata tallying is to just like make discoverability easy within this huge set. So if someone wants to look for all the bastards that you can't figure out what the eyes are, like that should be easily navigatable. And not all X-eyed bastards are X bastards, because it could have a regular nose with an alien ear and then be an alien human with X eyes. So this one in this case would definitely be an X eyes, would probably be an X mouth. And then the tiara head question would be it's either an X head or we would mark this as a tiara, but that's something I'll have to look at a little bit more closely when we get that data better organized.
So I'm looking here. It looks like there are a couple lowball offers. The highest is 0.4 ETH, and the floor for X Bastards I think is 0.75 ETH. So where would you put a value on this? Like what would a range be that's realistic?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, with the sort of like either people are obsessed with X Bastards or not, and I feel like the whole X Bastards section is kind of like undervalued. So let me just click into X Bastards real quick.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I go through and click out the ones that look cool, 7 out of 10 times they're X
Totally.
bastards. These are the ones I love.
Yeah, so like I would definitely place this above the one that's listed at 0.75. I'd place this above the one that's listed at 1. It's probably close with the one that's listed at 1.3. I think it's probably better than the one at 1.5. Or yeah, I guess 3112. That's at 1.5. But you know, it's like one of those things where it's kind of like, what's the goal? Is the goal to sell this within 24 hours? Is the goal to sell this at like the appropriate price in the next 3 weeks or something, or at a better price in the next 3 weeks? Like yeah, I think this one in particular, like I'd be holding this if I had it personally.
All right. Now here's one that my thesis on this is that it's undervalued and I like it and could pick it up cheap. So take a look at 1215.
1215. Interesting. Yeah, so this is the these black and white backgrounds, which B&W I'd say are like one of the most famous backgrounds because they were so distinct in the early days that it allowed for everyone without the metadata to kind of like hunt really aggressively for them. I think it'd probably be pretty hard to, and I guess it depends on your definition of cheap here. But let me just like get this list of black and whites here. So yeah, the cheapest one at 0.7. And I think the one that you actually flagged here, the 1215 is kind of unique in the sense that it's like super light. Not a lot of darkness in there. It's more of like a gray with like very subtle black, which kind of makes it stand alone a bit. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting one in that sense. And then it also has like other characteristics. So personally, like I'm not a fan of the medical masks. I think I think too many punks have medical masks. I think too many punks have clown noses. And that's just from like looking at the set, I think, and just being like, it's obfuscating interesting stuff. So I probably have this sort of like this biased look on those characteristics. But yeah, it kind of depends on who the seller is and whether or not you can kind of like get their eye. But yeah, I'm curious. What do you think you could bid on this and get it for from this nobody owner?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, I just see the bid. I see there's a bunch of 0.1 bids. I didn't realize that black and white was a coveted category, and something about the way that lime green pops against the black and white is just really cool, and the kind of like amazed look that's in their eyes, like they're getting their hair swept back by the wind. I know a lot of the scraggly hair ones, and I as a scraggly hair haver, I identify with that, but they're kind of scraggly on both sides, but this is it's more like windswept, which I like, and I just really like that. I like the eyes, and I like the bright green.
Yeah, totally. That does remind me. So there's kind of like two things that I have noticed. One is kind of like, as you mentioned, is kind of like how the background works with the colors of the punk. Like people talk about a lot. It's like their main talking point when they bring up what they like or what's notable to them is kind of like how these colors are playing together often. And then kind of like on top of that, the sort of like the green hair with the green skin, like when things are actually like themed together that way. Like if this had, it'd be an entirely different bastard at that point. But if it had like a green background, like there was an ape that had like, green glasses, green skin, green background that sold for like, 3x floor this morning or something, because it's just like, super themed together. But then the second part was exactly the hair as you mentioned. So this is the, I think it's called like purple hair or something like that in the OG punk. But in Bastards, like colors don't matter. They're kind of like randomly, generated. We will use purple hair here to define what this hair is, but it is on the rarer side, I think. Without knowing the exact data now, just from like browsing, my intuition is that this hairstyle is on the rarer side. But yeah, it'll be called purple hair. There's this sort of like, the idea is really that our language kind of like mapping over to the punk world, I think is like a useful sort of bridge. Instead of having to, develop a vocabulary from scratch, there's already a vocabulary that kind of defines a lot of these things. So I think kind of keeping the language together helps kind of onboard users, makes their sort of exploration into the collection a little bit easier.
All right, let's go with 8,049.
Okay, yeah, this is great. So this is like the pink with hat hair, even though the hair is blue, which I would also say is on the rarer side. I think the purple hair is a bit rarer.
No, I think we're on a different one. 8049. It's like a ape with a vape, and then there's this black and white vertical
yeah, that's the
background.
one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So that the black hat it has on top with the two dots is basically the signal that this is the pink with hat is what it's called.
Okay.
But yeah, the hair is not pink, obviously, so like again, kind of creates confusion. But yeah, the apes are going at a premium also. So like this is something else that's like aesthetic specific. Apes are rare in the original punks. They are not rare here. There's like 2,000 of them, but people still buy them up at extreme prices. Like that tassel hat kind of hoodie combo went for 9 ETH, and like a large part of that to me is probably that it's an ape as well. And then the background on this is a super rare background. So let's see, yeah, vertical fours, which is just representative of like a 4-pixel width that is basically like a fixed width stripe pattern. So there's vertical fours, there's horizontal fours, and then there's checkers, which is kind of those two fixed width stripes kind of like crossing over each other. But within the vertical fours, like I think there's only like 9 of these or something like that. Yeah, it looks like 11, and there's 3 with that exact black white combination. And then yeah, I think it's probably the coolest of that set because it has like the clean ape on it. Then there's kind of like a messy one with like a clown nose, and then maybe like I don't know if this is actually an X Bastard, but it has some X Bastard qualities that maps. Yeah, it is an X Bastard. But yeah, I think this one's really cool. I really like these the vertical fours and the horizontal fours, but I think that's probably due to like their rarity. I mean aesthetically they're pleasing, but they're also like super rare. So I'm always drawn the moment that I see them.
And would you consider that a necklace one? I know that's a or what is it? Floating head, the one where there's no neck at all, or does he kind of has a trace of a neck there on the left?
Yeah, I would say this does have a neck, and it does have a gold necklace. It's just underneath that sort of that thicker beard. I don't know if that's called, maybe it's a luxurious beard, but you can see like that one yellowish pixel. And then the big clue here is that the background tells us kind of like whether or not there's a neck. A lot of these, like whether or not it's a neck or it's a stripe or it's part of the glitch or something, they can get kind of tricky. But if you know exactly what you're looking for, there's kind of like hints. So in this case, because we can see the vertical fours across the board, and we know that that's basically what the design of the glitch is, then we know that basically the lack of seeing the white stripe on that sort of like that third row over or that third column over means that this is a neck, even though it kind of like blends in with the black line.
Got it. All right, last one here. Let's go with 722. A very special bastard.
Oh yeah, so this is the one that we were discussing a little bit earlier here, with the sort of like it has the tassel hat on the top, obviously, and then it has this hoodie kind of like shadow coming off the left, and then you can also see like remnants of the hoodie running up the right side up until the cigarette, and then it kind of breaks. Something that Burke wrote in the original website was kind of describing that the GAN had issues with hoodies, which is I think what allowed for them to become so rare. I think there's like less than 50, and then of that 50, like a non-trivial portion is going to be like partial. So like a complete hoodie is quite a rarity. But when you see the partials, you can see things going wrong. Or there are these other bastards that have these plumes of what look like black smoke coming out of like a pipe or like on the back of their head. And those are also kind of like theorized as being like sort of like remnants of like hoodie interpretations that the GAN just like didn't figure out. But yeah, this is the one that sold for 0.77 15 days ago, and then for 9 ETH overnight. And to me it's like the 9 ETH trigger here. I would guess has to be related to the hoodie play. And people just like siphoning up all the hoodies that they can grab. But it's also an ape which plays for it. And then the other thing that I think is like super notable is the tassel hat kind of like matches really well with the egg carton background. These sorts of like the red color specifically in that tassel hat and on that egg carton background, like almost like it almost like looks like you're looking through the tassel hat to the background in a way that's kind of unique. Usually those are a little bit more distinct from one another. So this was actually when I think the person listed this at 0.277 or 0.77 2 weeks ago, and I had multiple people ping me about this, being like, "Wait a minute, that is way too cheap for this." And I'm pretty sure it sold within an hour or something of being listed. To see it flipped for 14x or whatever 2 weeks later is a pretty amazing story.
Damn, and that's the one that Kobe bought, isn't it?
I'm not sure if. I guess that's a good question. I'm not sure because the account's unnamed, and I know his OpenSea is JVFC. So I'm not sure if maybe I can't imagine. Yeah. So he definitely didn't mint it, and then he definitely didn't sell it for 0.77. So I'm not sure if somehow he's 31B8 E3 or where that came from.
The punks are out there. They're minted. You're active in the Discord, a few other people, there's this active community of buyers. But what kind of stuff are you doing? You talked about the metadata project, but like how is the community kind of keeping going now that they're all out there? Like where do you see the community going from here?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of like there's two lines. There's like one, thinking about the BGANs as a product, and that product needing to have new users in the future and needing to reduce churn, so those users sticking around, and then there's kind of like this other level of like what can come from that product once it's kind of like finalized. So a big part of it is getting this project into that sort of like that product space, so it can be both this sort of like this art experience, but also it's compatible with people building whatever they want to build on top of it. So the metadata project's largely dedicated towards that first part, right? We get all the metadata on chain attached to each one of these NFTs, and everyone owns their bastard. Like what you can do with your NFT programmatically once all the metadata is like there for you to reference, and is definitely not going to be changing. Like you can kind of do anything you want. So that's kind of the first stage, is getting us to that point, and getting all that metadata kind of secured and on chain. Then the second part is kind of like what can you build? So I mentioned the glitch picks airdrop coming, and what you see is like people coming up with ideas from scratch in the community, and then there's this kind of like this kind of split between like people having ideas for stuff and people being able to build their ideas. And so some of the stuff that like you do see, so like I've mentioned BokkyPoobah a couple times, but he's been playing with some sort of like some sort of software that allows for him to take a BGAN and convert it into like this 3D sort of metaverse compatible BGAN. That looks kind of like a Meebit, but it's it's your BGAN being converted to a Meebit instead, or Meebit in terms of the shape. And so like you can imagine a world in which all the metadata is on chain for BGAN v2, and someone builds a contract that allows for you to basically deposit your v2. And then generate this sort of like this 3D kind of compatible version with all the characteristics, because it's able to read from the metadata. So like that's, what is really interesting about the space overall to me is that like when it comes to that idea, like you don't need permission from anyone to do that. Anybody can build that project if the appropriate sort of like infrastructure is in place, and the infrastructure in this case being, again, the metadata that references all the characteristics that someone would need to kind of like programmatically generate that 3D version of a BGAN. Another idea that came from the glitch picks was, we're talking about basically this glitch picks drop. There's going to be, for every V1 and V2 BGAN Punk, there were, I think, 73 V1s and then 11,305 V2s. Every every BGAN will basically be a key to unlock a glitch pick NFT. And what glitch picks are basically these glitchy backgrounds, but only glitchy backgrounds. So no combs, no solid backgrounds, but all these different glitches and different colors and different designs. And then there's kind of like a range of types within that. So like 9,000 or so are the kind of the glitchies that we're used to seeing. Then there's like 1,000 that are kind of like GIF-like, where they're kind of like flashing from different glitch designs. And then there's this super rare bastardist version that is like this GAN kind of generated like morphing version of these different glitchies morphing into one another. That's just like really fucking cool to just kind of like watch loop. And so all of a sudden you have this backdrop, and you already see this all over Twitter, is people taking their punk and dropping it into, what the currency project or whatever with Damien Hirst, like people dropping their punk or their Bored Ape on top of whatever their Hirst print was. And so, the glitch picks is kind of doing that. Not only is it kind of like catering to this sort of like generative, more abstract sort of like art community that's out there, and I think is really missing the BGAN project as a project that fits really nicely into that set. It's kind of, BGANs are PFPs and that sort of generative space like kind of merged into one. But glitch picks are more kind of compatible with that sort of art blocks crowd, I think. And then, the idea of being able to layer these different PFPs on top of glitch picks, like if you were going to do that and you wanted to kind of solidify it as an NFT, that's kind of interesting. Maybe there's, another version of BGANs that requires you to kind of like, deposit your V2 into a smart contract. That smart contract kind of like lays your bastard on top of whatever glitch pick that you deposit at the same time, and then you get this kind of this new collection that comes out the other side. Then there was one other idea that I had in a similar vein here, that was discussed in a similar vein, where people were talking about like hypes and BokkyPoobah's tool, where you could kind of step through these hypes and you could see that basically that hype is just all of these different bastards, but they just slowly morph into one another. And it was like, well, what if I could deposit my hype into a smart contract and get a dump of all of the bastards that were in that hype? That's kind of interesting. Not to mention, it's like, depending on where you are in that hype, which frame you're on, you can, you might be going from an ape to an alien, and then, halfway through that transformation, it's an ape alien, which is kind of a cool thing to have, again, because the rarity from the V2 perspective, but also there might be a moment in which it's like an ex-bastard, and I can't make out what it is, and that's really cool. So it's kind of like, you can imagine that being kind of like a new collection that's generated from that original collection. So it's kind of like, there's this V2 collection, getting it kind of like situated, and then from there, like anybody can build anything to kind of like, utilize what is available, what the V2s are, and create these entire worlds from them. So it's kind of we'll see what people do, but it is kind of that is what's beautiful about the space more generally, is it's open and anybody who wants to build can just start building.
One NFT project that's really caught my eye is this one that just launched called fractional.art. So the idea for that is you can deposit one NFT or a basket of NFTs, and it can be a basket of NFTs that are updated, and then issue an ERC20 token against that basket in shares. So the idea is like, you own a punk, you put that in there, and suddenly, you can issue 100,000 shares of that punk that can be tradable. And I think there's about 3 or 4 punks that are on there now, as well as a basket of 16 punks that has not been, I believe it's been fractionalized, but not, you have to then provide liquidity and put up a bunch of ETH to make it actually tradable. So I don't think they've done that yet. I'm really curious to see what happens there. And I noticed that there's one punk one bastard that was listed on there, but it looks like they unfractionalized it or went back to square one. But do you know of anyone who's kind of putting together a package of bastards on there, or do you think that we'll eventually see individual bastards that are fractionalized and traded on there?
Yeah, this came up in the Discord the other day, and there's a brief discussion about it. I'm not sure if it's the same person that has the punk on there, but they were kind of just like, this is an interesting idea. And then the kind of discussion pivoted to like, well, what BGANs are kind of like worth fractionalizing, getting onto that platform, providing liquidity. There's this question of like, well, if you took a floor BGAN right now and you plugged it in, like, is that going to get any traffic? And I think the kind of answer to that question is really just a matter of like, well, how many people are interested in that set that can't afford to get in, even at floor prices? Like maybe, zero point 0.1 ETH, which was, I think, the floor when this conversation happened. That's $200. Like maybe somebody has $20 and that's what they're trying to do. It's kind of hard to do on Ethereum with gas prices and everything like that. But yeah, there's kind of this question of, all right, well, you could do it with floors. Maybe that doesn't make as much sense. If you did it with like a hoodie or something, I can imagine people getting behind that. And, if someone doesn't have 10 ETH to buy a hoodie, then all of a sudden, putting half an ETH in for partial hoodie kind of makes sense. I think the whole design of the fractionalize is really kind of genius. You're just kind of like allowing for more people to participate in the market than would be able to at kind of like, whole price, which, to me only seems like it has upside. But then I did also see other people kind of commenting on like, as you just mentioned, like you basically have to provide liquidity. Like it's not just, take your item, plug it into the contract, and then it just like gives you everything you need. You kind of have to follow up with the token once you get it. You have to go create the liquidity pool and stuff like that. And like this is when it comes to user adoption, like these are the types of things that it's just like it takes time for people to be knowledgeable enough to understand what to do in those spots. And so whether or not our person who created that punk kind of like ran into some roadblocks there, or maybe it was a floor punk. I'm not sure which one it was. And then all of a sudden, like to approve everything they needed to approve and then provide liquidity, all of a sudden they're paying as much in fees to do all those things in order to fractionalize the BGAN. Maybe that's when they kind of like turned back or something. But yeah, I think it's super interesting, and it's kind of just a matter of like, will people do it, and do they sufficiently kind of like gather energy, right, for people to kind of like follow up? Like, I think doing anything kind of like isolated and hoping for discovery just isn't going to work well. So whoever creates the first BGAN with liquidity on Fractionalize, like they need to post in the Discord to get people to come and invest in that, right? And ideally they're able to post with like a pitch, like, hey, I just got this one, like it's obviously a sick one, look at it. Who wants to buy a piece of it? Like you'd get traction if you can kind of target your audience.
Yeah, that was actually correctly. Me in the Discord. I just got really excited because it had launched like that day, and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna buy a couple and like throw them in there, because like. Here's my thought process. Like, I think I like these. I like the idea of owning them almost as a DAO. Like, I know Mooncat, I was talking to him. He, is the main collector, but he's got a group of people that he's buying with and pooling money, like what something like People Pleaser DAO is doing. Getting these, getting a group of people to kind of like co-curate the set. And my initial thesis was like, okay, I have a certain amount of ETH that's pretty low that I can like kind of bootstrap an initial set, and then you sell some, and then you use that ETH to trade up the chain and get cooler and cooler ones, and then the set kind of evolves a community and a life of its own. But yeah, like as the platform's been going for about a week or so, and like I think you're right, like you probably would have to start with a higher end one that kind of is like the star attraction of the show. Then you can use that to like bootstrap more in there. And the other thing, like you were saying about the community, like one thing I have noticed with the punks, like I bought a couple shares of the hoodie punk, which was fractionalized by D's, who's like, a big NFT influencer, and he's the moderator of the Discord, and he's doing Twitter Spaces for several hours a day with NFT people. His just blew up and exploded in value, and there's some other punks that are in there that I don't know if there's issues with liquidity, or just they weren't as publicized, or they're lower in the search results. But yeah, like I think to do it right, you need a good amount of capital, and you need some kind of a community element to push it forward to develop right. Desire. But I'm super bullish on this idea of fractionalizing NFTs and getting kind of just like turbocharging the social fun community aspect of it. So totally. Yeah, bullish fractional going forward.
Definitely agree. And yeah, I think there's kind of like there's two things there. One is there is a sort of like a feedback loop too. So it could be actually like really advantageous for there to be like a low entry BGAN Punk sort of vault here. Particularly like after that D's hoodie went live, and then I started seeing like in a Twitter space all these people using that hoodie as their avatar. Right, it's just like, this is genius, right? Like, it's a meme that everyone now feels like they have the right to kind of share in spreading. And then so now it's like this hoodie cult of hundreds of people running around Twitter, and everyone's gonna be like, what the hell is this hoodie? But doing the same thing for BGAN, like, of course it makes sense, right? It's kind of like, I think that would be, maybe it's not really like you need an expensive one, but if you can get a couple, like even doing like a little pool of BGANs, like if you had like 3 to 5 or something, and they were all like pretty good looking ones, or there was maybe a range, and everyone, again, it kind of gives people the right to use those avatars now, that set of avatars as their PFP for a cheap price. Like, yeah, it's kind of like, yes, you want more people flexing their BGAN in public. Like, that's perfect, and if they can do that for cheaper and feel good about it, then that's great too. So yeah, super bullish on that. But to that second point of sort of like, the right person kind of driving it and kind of approaching it the right way. There's recently been like somebody in the Bastard Discord like setting up these on cyber art rooms where it's like, he goes out, he puts out a sort of call like, who wants to display a few of their bastards. And what it, just reminded me of is kind of like having a gallery in the city or something, and the work that kind of goes into that. And what's kind of interesting about those experiments that have been run so far is they're not very successful in the sense of like generating traffic or noise to the project. But if someone were like a specialist at that, at that sort of specific task. So if I was going to be like an art dealer in the NFT space, and I wanted to host a gallery, and I was going to specifically like seek out people, and I was able to pull people in to come check out that gallery, all of a sudden those dynamics are kind of like situated right. But it calls back to that same general point of kind of like you being a person that has sort of like reach or reputation within those different sort of bubbles that you need to have reach or reputation with in order to kind of like draw attention, get people in the door, looking at the new pieces from this project or that project, or from this art collector who decided that they were gonna help you do that. But it's kind of like you being an influencer on Twitter is like a thing, but I think there's an opportunity for even things like being an influencer within the sort of like your aesthetics for NFTs. But it's all so early that it's kind of like, it'll be really interesting to see where all this stuff matures to.
Well, you've been super generous in this conversation. I know we've gone on a while, but thank you so much for coming on here and sharing what you know. It's like, this is such a deep project. It's kind of several careers worth of work to unpack it and understand it. So thanks for all the work that you've been putting in and taking the time to educate people. And me, I'm about to go bid on this one we talked about when we get off.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, is there anything I didn't ask you? Are there any other NFT projects you like? Where can people find you to connect with you if they want to follow up?
I'm Snooplyin in the Discord, Snooplyin42 on Twitter. Those would be the best places. Feel free to DM me. You can reach me in either of those spots. Always happy to chat about whatever with anybody. And then, I guess in regards to other projects, most of my energy and attention goes into BGANs for sure. But I'm kind of just trying to monitor the whole space. So I mentioned earlier on, like BGANs was attracted to me because like not only did I become obsessed with like the art, but once things didn't finish minting, it became like an engineering problem to solve, right? And so it's kind of like, well, I think I can help solve this problem. So I'm gonna kind of deploy some of my skills to do that. And so that's kind of how I'm just like, viewing the whole NFT space right now, where it's just like there's a ton of stuff going on, tons of projects with different approaches. You have these games cropping up now that are having crazy amounts of success. You have, the Punks comic doing all this interesting stuff with like burning and earning these founder tokens in order to vote for the DAO in the future, or you can stake underneath, like just like all these different ways to kind of like play with what this NFT space is. And I'm so bullish on the space because I feel like it's like we're so early in people understanding like an NFT is basically a data structure, right? And we're we're in this space of thinking that it's like it's an avatar on Twitter, but it's like, no, it's a data structure, and the entire internet is data structures. So like, how can you use all these different things? How can you use all these different data structures in ways that are compatible with, you know, the fluidity of sort of this Ethereum economy? Like it really kind of breaks the whole game wide open. So there's going to be so many interesting opportunities in the future, and it's kind of just like there's always going to be this wave pushing forward, as is the case with anything that's sort of like competitive and innovative, and it's going to be a matter of kind of like staying at the front of that wave. So yeah, I'm mostly just kind of like trying to keep my eyes open and kind of dig into anything that seems interesting to understand like how people are thinking about it, what they're going to do with it, what might be able to be done with something next. But yeah, those are a couple of interesting things going on.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. We're going to keep an eye on BGANs, and can't wait to see what happens with this airdrop and what trends are emerging in the Discord as we go on.
Totally. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.